So the next thing I want to do is I want to create our text. We can come up to the text tool here, click it, and we can click anywhere in the window, and we can type Iron Man. Now we don't see it because my font's actually white, so I'll select all that by pressing Command A, and I'll make that black. It's clearly way too small, so we can come into our character window here. We can scale this up, maybe 150. We have to change the vertical spacing to match the font size. And now we can come into our paragraph window and we can make sure our text is stacked in the center. And then hop into our align and center it horizontally and vertically. So now we have this right in the center of our composition. It's actually looking a little big for me, so I'll double click that, hop into our character window, maybe take it down to 125. Maybe something like 110. And we'll just go ahead and realign it to make sure we're still centered. Next, I want to create our squares in the corners. So I was playing around with this earlier, and I found that a good size for the squares were about 15 pixels wide by 15 pixels tall. So I want to make a square composition in our pre-comps here and call it squares. We'll go ahead, we'll just make that 95 wide by 95 tall, and I'll press OK. Now I want to create some squares. Again, we can do this using solids. So I can press Command Y on the keyboard, or go to Layer, New, Solid, and I'll just call it Square 1, and I'll make it 15 by 15. And now I want to make 5 copies of these. So I can press Command D on the keyboard to duplicate it, or I can come up to Edit, Duplicate. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5. And now After Effects has some really great layout tools. So I'll select my first square here. I'll align that to the far left. I'll select my last square here. I'll align it to the far right. Now I'll select all my squares, distribute them horizontally to create even spaces between all 5 of my elements. And I actually want to select all of these, change my alignment to composition, and I'll move them all to the top of the composition. So I'll select this first square, and I'm actually going to solo it, and I'm going to duplicate this 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll do a very similar process. I'll take this top square here, and I'll align it to the bottom of the composition. I'll select all 5 of these, and I'll distribute them, this time, vertically. And now what I want to do is I want to go down the line, and I want to do the same process. Now the reason I soloed this is so it's easy to tell which are your new squares versus which are your old squares. So again, I'll duplicate this 5 times, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take this top one, I'll align it to the bottom of the composition. I'll select all 5 of the elements that are soloed, and I'll distribute them vertically. And I'm just going to go ahead and go down the line real fast and do that for my remaining 3 sets of squares. Okay, great. So here we are, and we have our grid. And now we actually don't need all of these squares because we want to create sort of an angular pattern. So I'll go ahead and I can start deleting layers, or you can just turn off the eyeball in case you think you may want them later. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete all these layers here. So we have our nice angle. And then I'm sort of randomly just going to pick some other ones to delete to create sort of a random gridded effect. Maybe something like that. So we can hop back in to our pre-comp here. We can come up to our project panel and drag in our squares element. And we can go ahead and reposition this in the top right. Now, our back rectangle is clearly too strong, so we can just go ahead, select that, press T on the keyboard to bring up the opacity, and we'll turn this way, way down. I want it to be really subtle. I'm even going to go something like 10%. And now we can actually take our text, flip that back to white.